so much. All right, last one after the break. Is everybody excited? Luckily for you, I can do my presentation in 10 seconds. Give or tell before universities. That's pretty much it. But if you'd like me to expand on it a little bit more, I think I can do that too. So what is a university? About 1,000 years ago, independent communities of scholars, independent from the church and independent from the state, in fact, state governments, gathering over a new information technology, the handwritten book. And a model that has remained remarkably stable for a millennia, as we've seen. And really, why mess with success, right? The reason that we have education is because we believe that there's something important that one generation has to transmit to the next. And so education has an inherently conservative mode to it, and there's a very good reason that we preserve things for centuries and for generations. So what's the problem? Why am I here to say that there's a crisis in higher education? One reason is that there's always a crisis in higher education because we keep asking more and more of it. And in particular, here in the United States, we did a really strange thing. We decided that this experience of higher education, of a university education, which heretofore had been available to a very tiny, tiny percentage of rich white men, would become the bedrock of opportunity. It would become the cornerstone of a meritocracy and a democracy. It would become an inherent part of the American dream, such as now, 9 out of 10 high school seniors, if you ask them what they're going to do with their lives, say that they want to go to college. And starting in the post-war era with the GI Bill and maturing out into the 1960s, we began to fund this idea, this crazy idea of mass higher education with the Higher Education Act. Lyndon Johnson promised that it means, with this act, that any young person can go to any college or any university in this great land of ours and not be turned away because his family is poor. And in California, the great university president, Clark Kerr, made the cover of Time magazine in 1960 for something he called the Master Plan, which was simply a method of organizing the state universities with the flagships at the top, the CSUs in the middle, and then the community colleges at the bottom, in order to serve, again, everybody in the population. Everybody who demanded a quality education could get a higher education through the system. So what's wrong with this right now? I spoke with the chancellor today of the CSU system, California State University system, Charles Reed, and I expected to get some reassuring words from him, but what he told me was that in 40 years, so his 40-year career, all the way back to the beginning of the master plan, he had never seen a meltdown such as the one that the California system, that the United States public university system in many states is currently experiencing. And in fact, he said publicly that we're witnessing right now the end of the master plan. Why is this happening? Well, bunch of different reasons. I think probably the most obvious to demonstrate is cost. Higher education is expensive. It is growing faster than inflation, faster than medical care. In fact, more than any other good or service in the entire economy since 1978. Out of control. The United States is featuring a quality problem based on partially the cost, partially the access issue. We fall into number 10 internationally in the percentage of our population that has at least some kind of post-college degree, some kind of post-high school degree. And the access problem is only growing because the master plan proved very, very popular, not only in the United States, but all throughout the world. And all throughout the world, there's been an incredible surge in the demand for higher education. And the surge is projected to continue, only more so, to the point where in a nation like India, we would have to build one campus every 2 weeks for 2,400 people in order to meet the demand between now and 2025. And UNESCO, in the report where they published these numbers, concluded that it seems to be physically impossible, actually, to build traditional campuses to meet the demand for higher education all around the world, notwithstanding the costs that it might take to do it, which clearly here in the United States, we don't seem to have the money or be able to address the cost problem as well. And if that weren't enough, like Woody Allen says, the problem is not only that there's not enough higher education, but that it's not good enough quality, right? We're facing a situation right now where young people, when they enter college, by the time they leave 4 to 6 years later, the jobs that are available to them may not have existed when they entered. And so the whole conservative model of education, of transmitting learning from one generation to the next, waiting for it to be codified in expertise and distribution requirements, is kind of disrupted right now because knowledge is changing so fast, and young people really feel that what's going on in the classroom is the gap between what goes on in the classroom and in their daily lives is getting bigger and bigger. And that is why they're spending their time in these traditional lectures actually just talking to their friends. So it seems to me that we've reached a situation where we have two choices. One is to change higher education, change the way we deliver it, change the way we define it, and the other one is to resign ourselves to never having enough. And to talk about how I think higher education should be changed, it doesn't involve presenting you with a map to the future, but what I really want to do is talk about a compass and a set of directions. And in order to do that, we really need to talk about the different benefits that higher education provides. And it's always been a very, very complex institution. And the major benefits that it provides to our society, number one, content, right? Skills, knowledge, information. Number two, socialization. So a young person leaves their house, becomes an adult, starts to feel independent, connects with a community of peers, gains relationships with mentors, develops themselves as a human being, ideally in a higher education setting. Content, socialization, and finally accreditation. This is something that is a major feature of the way higher education fits into our economy, especially, that you need that diploma in order to get the benefits of the degree. If you just leave college with 4 years of classes, but you don't have a diploma, the impact on your future income and your future life is much, much less. So content, accreditation, and socialization, the three benefits that higher education provides. The answer to all of them, I think, starts with one word, and that is open. So I met with Judy Baker. She is the leader of the Community College Consortium for Open Educational Resources at Foothill De Anza Community College, and over 100 community colleges around the country have joined into this consortium. I start with community colleges because it's there you can see that the need is greatest, because community college students spend about $1,000 a year on books, which is equal to what they spend on tuition. So switching to digital textbooks is a massive, massive social gain, and it's all too often in communities like this one that we don't talk about the moral case for innovation. But when you're talking about an adjunct teacher, a freeway flyer who teaches at 5 different colleges and is carrying around 5 different heavy books, the ability to sign on and to access digital textbooks, to collaboratively work on higher education materials, it saves faculty time, and faculty time is really the coin of the realm in higher education. It is 75% of a typical college's budget. And so we're talking about using content, using open educational resources to cut faculty's time that they spend on preparing outside the classroom so that they can spend more time inside the classroom. And many people are familiar with MIT's OpenCourseWare. The TED Talks is another really great example of the open educational resources that have bloomed out there on the internet, that have allowed millions, tens of millions of people to access the benefits of sitting in a lecture hall at the world's greatest universities. That's content. Content is awesome. Content is only the first step, right, in open education. We need to talk about open teaching, because you can't talk about a university education without talking about what teachers are doing in the classroom and outside the classroom. So the benefit of these open educational resources is that they change the role of the teacher from a person standing up on stage talking to a group to someone who's on the side as you're learning these resources, someone who's helping you, mentoring you, a coach, maybe a librarian who's connecting you with digital resources, helping you form research questions on your own. And so Judy Baker is one person who said to me that she views the access to digital resources as being kind of a Trojan horse or a catalyst for unlocking the possibility for faculty members to leverage all the resources that are available with the internet to change the way teaching works. And one example of how this is working is the massively open online courses that have been taught by George Siemens in the University of Manitoba and many others, where you have 2,400 people learning together over on wikis, teaching each other and evaluating each other in a model that is entirely open. Peer-to-peer university is another example of taking open educational content and forming self-organized online classes that are taught by volunteers, where you're taking the materials and you're forming the community around them to teach and learn. So open ed accreditation then becomes kind of the hardest nut to crack, and there's a couple different ways of thinking about it. If you want to look inside the university, you can look at something like UMW Blogs, which is a way for people at the University of Mary Washington to post their classwork online, to form assignments that are published to the open web, so that by the time they graduate, they have demonstrable groups of their own work that they can show to an employer and say, this is what I do, this is how I do it. Behance is an example of a network outside traditional institutions. People that are visual artists can post their portfolios online. Again, these are voted up or down by members of the community. You gain reputation within the network by making good recommendations, and employers can then recruit off of this website without any diploma needed, any intermediary of any organization. So we can see how openness really is changing the way that the university model can work. And I want to give you a quick view of how this might look from the point of view of students, because after all, the reason we have universities is for the students. Of course, there's an old model where you get your acceptance letter, you go to college, you get your diploma, you get your nice desk job, everything's great. This model has been really oppressive to people because it has never been the majority experience, and it's not the majority experience right now. Only 7 out of 10 Americans actually graduate high school. Only 4 out of 5, actually, this has gotten worse. About half of them get a degree within 6 years after they enter a 4-year institution. Only 38% of Americans get any kind of post-secondary degree. 6 out of 10 college students transfer during their career. 1 in 4 currently are taking at least one online course. 9 out of 10 are doing at least one internship, supplementing their classroom experience with real-world experience because they know that that's what they need to do to succeed. And finally, 7 out of 10 college students right now are graduating with student loans averaging $23,000. So what might this new model look like? A new model that really matches just more of the reality that we have today. First of all, by not setting people up for unrealistic expectations that they're going to go somewhere to an institution that's going to hand them everything they need. That's not how you succeed in the real world. You need to be able to be proactive and independent to imagine your own future. And so that's what we need to be teaching. We need to teach people to draw their own maps. So the first step in all of this is know thyself. You have to choose your own goal. That is step number 0 in producing any kind of education, and DIY education is just one way of looking at that. This goal then becomes the basis of your personal learning network, in which you assemble resources from all over the world, all over the internet, all over different institutions. You've got books, you've got blogs, you've got classes, and you find the people that will connect you to the resources that you need, and you ask the questions and build the relationships that will allow you to eventually join into a community. Experience, I'm putting a little bit bigger on this side because I think that all too often when we think about the future of education, we're talking about distance learning, but the whole purpose of using open educational resources is to enable us to enhance our own experiences. We learn through experience. And all of this can be conceptualized as the process of joining a community of practice. So community of practice is a concept in anthropology that what happened in cultures before there were any schools? How did people learn things before there were schools? It turns out that people would organize around groups, and they studied midwives in the Yucatan, tailors in West Africa, group of urban addicts in recovery, and they all had really similar processes that approximated this idea of a personal learning network. You present yourself to the community. You take on simple tasks at the elbow of an expert. You form mentoring relationships, and you teach as soon as you learn. So as soon as you've learned something, you go and you teach it to someone else. Your peer-based relationships are just as important as your mentoring relationships. And as you progress closer into the circle, you're constantly demonstrating your skills, you're constantly contributing to a community. And this is the ideal of what we want to do within any kind of higher education setting. We want to be able to constantly connect it to the world of ideas and constantly connect those ideas to the world of experience. And by the way, we talked about the idea that teachers can't teach what they don't know. I would argue that teachers have to teach what they don't know. They have to expose their lack of knowledge. Because what a teacher really can do the most, and the only thing they can do for you, is they can help you identify your own questions and figure out how to ask those questions and come to a solution. So it turns out again that this idea of the new type of university is really all about a community. It's about growing into a community, becoming part of a community. And the thing that I like about this is that it's actually really, really traditional. Right? So the word university comes from Universitas Magisterium et Scholarum, and it means guild, a guild of masters and scholars. And so what was central to the concept of the ancient university was actually the relationship amongst the people that were gathered to learn. Not the content of what they were learning, not the building that they were in, not any one lofty concept or idea, but simply the relationship among them. And the word college, by the way, means the same thing. A college means a group. So, this idea of what a university is or what a university might be, I think is actually very, very old, in the same way that it's very, very new. And as bold as the scholars were in Bologna and London and Paris 1,000 years ago, I think that's as bold as we have to be right now to invent an entirely new type of institution that doesn't bear any resemblance to anything that's come before, and to do it with each other's help.